Okay, I'm going to talk about Aaron Bushnell. And if you haven't heard this story, Aaron Bushnell was a U.S. airman who committed suicide. He lit himself on fire outside of the Israeli embassy in protest of the genocide in Gaza. Okay, that was the reason he gave for kind of protesting this sacrificial form of protest that he took part in, right? So we can debate about whether the the situation in Gaza is actually a genocide. We can debate about whether or not Israel is justified, but I don't. I want to get down to the brass tacks here. Okay, like so, if we think about the reason for violence, if we think about the reason for war, what is the underlying reason? We can maybe we can say that it's religion, right? Maybe we can say that one religion is at war with another, and this conflict and the divide between those religions is causing the conflict. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's just one nation attacks another and they respond, right? Maybe that's why. And some time ago, perhaps hundreds of years ago, there was a first attack, right? There was a first offense, and it's just been in a cycle since of violence, right? Of returning or of back and forth warfare, right? But I'm kind of here to tell you that neither of those are the reasons for violence. None of them are the reasons for this war in Gaza. The actual cause of this war in Gaza is fear. Okay, that is the most basic underlying cause that we can establish or that we can declare. Because just imagine fear is out of the picture. Imagine nobody has fear. Okay, imagine you have no fear of dying. What would that mean? Well, that would mean you'd be pretty reckless, right? But beyond reckless, you would just have you'd have no awareness, right? You would effectively be an amoeba who didn't, who had no ability or no fear of being killed by, I don't know, some sanitizer that you spray on your kitchen counter, right? You would just be a germ. But the difference between an amoeba, perhaps, and a human being is that we have fear. We have evolved to develop fear. It's a very complicated emotion. It's a very sophisticated emotion. And in addition to that, we have also evolved to be conscious of that fear. So we've evolved to be able to recognize fear in ourselves and beyond, right? So if you imagine that fear, again, doesn't exist in a human being, what motivation would you have to attack the person who's attacking you? For example, if you were an individual in Gaza, an innocent civilian, or a member of Hamas, what motivation would you have to attack Israel if you had no fear? Basically, what I'm saying is that the most basic cause of the most basic catalyst of violence is fear. And I think that's a pretty fair analysis of this reality we live in, of the human condition in general. So if we look at this Israel-Gaza conflict through that lens, we basically can determine that the reason Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th was because they were fearful. Okay, we can dig deeper into that. Why were they fearful? Well, they were fearful because perhaps Israel was perhaps oppressing Gaza a little bit. They were putting a blockade on them, and that economic blockade basically kept their economy from developing in the manner that many first world economies are developing, and that kept them in poverty, right? We know the unemployment rate in Gaza was through the roof, and of course now is through the roof. So that poverty, what's that poverty lead to? Poverty leads to scarcity, okay? If you have an undeveloped economy, you live in a world of scarcity. So that world of scarcity leads to all kinds of hardships. It leads to a hard lifestyle, right? And in all likelihood, that leads to fear. Okay, the hard lifestyle leads you to fear things, and you're going to look for some environmental cause of that fear. And in this case, I guarantee you Hamas, the individuals, Hamas terrorists, if you want to call them that, are just a group of fearful individuals seeking to get rid of their fears. And in their mind, the cause of their fears is Israel, okay? The IDF, perhaps. And this, we could go back further in history, okay? Why is there a blockade on Gaza? Why is Israel blockading Gaza? Why are they effectively suppressing their economy? Well, there were previous attacks on Israel by Hamas, by Gazans, right? Radical Gazans. And maybe this blockade was an attempt for Israel to defend themselves from Hamas, right? Again, Israel in this case is their defense tactics are just built based on fear. They fear being attacked by the enemy. So in order to move past this conflict, we have to become conscious of our underlying emotions that are causing the conflict. Okay, it's not Israel's fault. It's not Hamas's fault. It is the underlying emotion that is fear. And if we keep blaming the other group, what is the logical conclusion? Well, we're seeing it right now. The logical conclusion is more violence, right? If we continue to try to solve this underlying emotion with violence, we're just going to create more fear in ourselves and in our opposition. And when you give your opposition a reason to be fearful of you, perhaps they attack you. And then they, in attacking you, they give you a reason to attack them back. Again, it's just a vicious cycle of fear. The only way to fix this problem is to get rid of the fear. And it's not to say that's even possible, right? But you don't get rid of the fear by, I don't know, somehow putting it out of your mind. You get rid of it by becoming conscious of it. And if we were to look at two prides of lions, right? Two opposing prides of lions. They're fighting with each other back and forth, right? And in doing so, they're creating the fear of the other pride. And lions are probably not conscious enough to become aware of this vicious cycle of violence that is increasingly leading to fear and more violence. So what humans have to do, what Israel and Gaza have to do, is they have to become conscious of this vicious cycle, and they have to leave their more basal instincts behind and deny the violence for unity. Okay, so if those two prides of lions were to either leave each other alone or were to unite and become one bigger pride, what is the conclusion there? Well, the logical conclusion is that the violence stops, and both sides, fear on both sides of the divide diminish. That is the only way to solve the problem. Violence will not solve the problem. Okay, and we can get rid of everyone in Gaza, right? Maybe, let's say that's possible. Let's say you kill everyone in Gaza. What is that gonna lead to? Well, okay, let's get rid of them all. Then what? Well, then another group of religious fundamentalists in Iran get pissed off at Israel for doing that. Well, you've just extended this violent war to, you've made it even bigger than it was before, and you didn't solve the problem. Again, you just made the vicious cycle bigger. This is what's going to happen if Hamas and the IDF don't get themselves under control together, okay? And you can continuously justify violence against your opposition because of your fear of them, but in truth, what really needs to happen is that the innocent civilians in Gaza need to gain control of the radical groups. They need to gain control of Hamas, and likewise, the innocent civilians in Israel need to gain control of the IDF. This is so, to go back to Aaron Bushnell, this is perhaps why this man committed suicide. He felt helpless. In his mind at the time, this was the best option he had to get this message across. It was to protest the military-industrial complex that is perhaps feeding Israel, this genocide in Gaza, and feeding Israel with, the weapons. He was going to protest it with this ultimate sacrifice that he made. And if you if you don't realize his mindset, then perhaps you'll just write him off as a mentally ill person, or maybe you'll write him off as some attention seeker. But in truth, if he's not an attention seeker, how could he be an attention seeker? He's not garnering any attention that he can experience himself, right? Okay, he's dead. So that doesn't make sense. He can't be an attention seeker. He's certainly, we could say he's mentally ill. Maybe that's a little true, but does that mean all of us who haven't killed ourselves are healthy? I don't think so. I think it means that that maybe Aaron Bushnell was just a little sicker than the rest of us, and he just had no other way out. This was the only way he felt capable of handling the situation. He was no longer compatible with this reality, with the world we're living in, and he didn't want to contribute to it. So I encourage you, don't think of Aaron Bushnell as some mentally ill person. Think of him as a symptom of the world we live in. Think of him as a symptom of the sick complacency of the United States population. We're complicit and complacent with this military-industrial complex. And his sacrifice, his suicide is not some sign of mental illness above all else. What it is it's a symptom. It's a symptom of a greater problem. And if you look at him as an individual and isolate him from the greater society he came from, then you miss the fact that the symptom or the problematic social structure is going to keep doing this to people. There's going to be more suicides. There's going to be more violence in general. There'll be more school shootings too. We're effectively sick as a society. And if you don't accept that because you don't want to label yourself as sick, well, then what are you going to do to prove you're not sick? Well, my advice is you better start, show you're active, be active. Be an activist somehow, or whether it means making YouTube videos, whether it means helping your community somehow. Help your community and don't contribute to this military-industrial complex. And we could talk about the elections in this case, who we're going to vote for, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, the two people who already have a track record of supporting the wars. Donald Trump, a lot of people say, oh, he doesn't start the wars. He's not a warmonger. He sure dropped a lot of bombs during his presidency, as did Joe Biden, as did Obama, and many presidents before them. In fact, the last president who tried to stop the war was murdered for it. Okay, and we know that JFK was murdered about a month after he declared he was going to leave Vietnam. Right? Is there a connection there? I would say so. Now, maybe you call me a conspiracy theorist for that. Go ahead, keep doing that. Keep seeing where this complacency it gets you with this military-industrial complex. Eventually, you're going to realize you're complicit in it, and you're going to start putting every fiber of your being into destroying it. And it'll look different for everybody. Unfortunately, some people may commit suicide because they see no other way out. Other people will find other ways to be active against this military-industrial complex, and that's what I encourage you to do. It's like, we are one species and we're attacking each other. It's like, do you see deer out there in the wild fighting each other for land? Or maybe they get in a little fight, but they're not dropping bombs on each other. Do you see trees in a forest fighting for space? Well, yeah, they do a little bit, but they don't nuke each other. They don't bomb each other, right? We have become so good at killing our own species that it's kind of like, it's the only example in nature we have of one species killing itself on this scale, and you have to think about it in that light. Why are we killing each other? Again, it comes down to fear. A long time ago, there was perhaps one violent catalyst that sprung all these violent, vicious cycles into action, and they haven't stopped. And until we use our consciousness and we truly think about the vicious cycle. And that doesn't mean you just acknowledge it. It means that you implement this strategy. You implement your consciousness of fear and your consciousness of this violent vicious cycle into every fiber of your being. It means you use it to create your strategies going forward. we think like violence is a short-term solution to fear, and it doesn't work in the long term. We need to become conscious of that vicious cycle and implement long-term solutions, which ultimately mean peace. Okay, it means leaving behind our basal instincts and evolving. In effect, we need to evolve as one species. And if we can't do that, well, you can sit in your home in the United States and hope that the violence never comes knocking on your door. But is that going to happen? I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. It probably will, though, eventually, whether it's a civil war or whether it's just a school shooting or something like that, or eventually you're going to be affected. And if you keep blaming the symptom and you never address the cause, you never address the fact that we are perhaps centuries into this vicious cycle of violence, then we're never going to stop it. Okay, you have to quit blaming the people who exist now, and you have to start blaming our instincts and trying to change those instincts. If you don't try to change the instincts, well, you're just signing up for more hell in the future. And if we talk about Aaron Bushnell a little more, I will say this: like, condolences to his family. I truly, I almost hope that they don't even see this video. It's not likely they will, but I don't like talking about suicide like this so quickly after its occurrence. But what you have to realize, though, is that if you're saying condolences to Aaron Bushnell's family, you're not even thinking about the mindset Aaron Bushnell is in. In reality, Aaron Bushnell looked at all of Gaza, and probably beyond Gaza, all of the world, as his family. And his solution to the fact that he could do nothing about that was to give up and, in effect, be a martyr in that process. Now, I'm not saying it's the best strategy to make change, but it sure has a lot of people thinking, right? It has me thinking about a lot of things. And who's not doing a lot of thinking is the mainstream media, right? They're not covering this. They'll do a little. I looked up this Aaron Bushnell incident on all your mainstream media platforms, and they're not talking about it a lot. They're not talking about it like you would expect they talk about it. And that's because it's not useful to them. Because these mainstream media platforms prop up candidates that support the military-industrial complex. They support Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who have proven their loyalty to the military-industrial complex in the 4 years of their presidency. And in that light, we're going to vote for somebody else. That's kind of the answer. But even beyond that, voting is just one small action that you, as a U.S. citizen or beyond, take in life. Just be kind, okay? Don't point fingers. Don't blame people for their mistakes, because you have to understand that if you were in their shoes, you would have done the exact same thing. You're not a better person because you happen to have a different set of experiences that led you down a different path. You had a different set of experiences, and that's why you took different actions than an Aaron Bushnell, or than a Hamas terrorist, or an IDF official. We have to forgive, and that's the message Jesus sends. That's the message that a lot of philosophers send. There's a reason, okay, and it's because ultimately forgiveness is the only path to understanding that this vicious cycle has us in its grip, and to escape that vicious cycle, we have to leave behind the fear, and together as a unified humanity, we can do anything. We could become an interplanetary species in a matter of like decades. There's this concept of the great filter, And basically, it's that there is something keeping us from discovering the next level of technology that would enable us to become an interplanetary species. And we're not going to discover it until we are ready, until perhaps until we've proven that we can leave behind this violence and this greed that drives us to hate our own species. Just imagine if there was an alien species watching over us, in the same way that you watch over a dog. Okay, what would dogs have to prove to us in order to allow them to be off leash all the time? In a first world country, we have leash laws. What would a dog have to prove to us to earn its right to be off leash and just free on this planet, everywhere? What would they have to prove? They'd have to prove that they weren't going to be violent. Okay, they'd have to prove that they were completely peaceful animals. And if there was an alien species looking over us, looking down on us, we would have to prove the same exact thing before we were allowed to leave this planet and explore the universe, before we were given the technology, before we were let off the leash, per se, in order to explore the universe. Otherwise, we would be like a dog off a leash. We would perhaps go and try to rule everything. We would become a threat to the solar system or beyond, the galaxy and beyond. It's hard to imagine that maybe there's an alien species controlling us in this manner, but it's not beyond my imagination, and it's not beyond the imagination of many other people out there. If we want to remove that great filter, if we assume there is a great filter, we have to get rid of our violent tendencies. We have to get rid of our divisiveness. Now, that's not to say it's not to say we need to get rid of all competition, but we have to get rid of the competition that drives violence. Okay, we can still have some economic competition. We can still have competition, sports competitions, we just can't be killing our own species. We'd have to, if this alien species was waiting to give us technology that allowed us to leave this planet, we'd have to prove that we were capable of being responsible with that technology. And, so far we have done exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite. We have every step of technology we gain, we get better at killing each other. And I don't want to make this seem like it's all doom and gloom, because the truth is we live in the safest time in all of recorded history, right? And that's a good pattern. Okay, I don't want to be super pessimistic here. I truly am not a pessimistic individual. I used to be, but not anymore. I want to encourage this unity between every human being on the planet, and part of doing that is looking at the reality and realizing that we are improving, but at the same time, we have the ability to destroy ourselves in a matter of moments, right? We have the technology to destroy ourselves very quickly, and all we have to do is decide we don't want to. All we have to do is let go of our pride a little bit, and let go of those fears that come with that pride, and forgive our opposition. And what will happen is, hopefully, in Israel and Gaza, the Israeli civilians will gain control of this IDF, and the Gazan civilians will gain control of Hamas, and beyond that, the U.S. civilians will gain control of the military-industrial complex that is corrupting its government, and all of the tax dollars they feed into that. How can you do that? Well, be nice in your community. Perhaps stop selling things in your community. Start trading things in your community. Trade goods and services, and that keeps less tax dollars out of the U.S. government. And vote differently, but above all, just be kind. If you're kind to your neighbor, their stress will ease, their fear will ease, and they will begin to think better. They'll begin to think more long term. A person without stress, without fear, that's not burdened by stress and fear all the time, is a person who is capable of thinking more logically. They're capable of leaving behind the short-term actions that lead us to violence. Okay, the short-term solutions that lead us to violence. And those, again, Those short-term solutions, the violent solutions, they're not solutions at all. They're just kicking the can down the road. And again, if you're an American and you feel like bombing Muslims is a good thing because, I don't know, they bombed you, well, every empire that's ever existed except those that are currently existing has collapsed. And the reason for that is because the corruption, the violence, it gets to everyone eventually. And you can hedge your bets and hope that America is never the victim of a civil war, another civil war, or of a world war, but it's just a foolish hope in my opinion. Again, there's never a nation that's going to last forever until there's only one nation. And it's not to say that we need to rush ourselves into a one world government, but we need to realize that one world government is the eventual solution to all of this crime and violence. Okay, so respect to Aaron Bushnell. I hope if there is a heaven or I don't know, some afterlife, I hope you're doing good. I hope you beyond that though, whatever comes after this life, I just hope that I hope that Aaron Bushnell's sacrifice doesn't go in vain. I hope makes people think about how sick the culture is today. It's like, this is a man, again, dedicated his whole life to be a U.S. airman, and he killed himself protesting what he dedicated his life to, because he realized how sick it was, how broken it was. And I don't think it's a pattern that's going to stop unless we collectively make it stop. And that means we have to drop all of the culture wars, gender wars, political wars. We have to prioritize the cessation of violence above all else. We can't keep fighting about bathrooms and religions and all these other culture wars, race wars. If we get distracted with this stuff, we're going to continue to hand money over to the people who are using it to kill people, and it's going to backfire eventually. I want you to understand that, like, above all, priority here is to diminish fear, and we diminish fear by diminishing violence, and at every step, we get rid of scarcity, and the fear disappears. If we keep being greedy, we keep being fearful, then we keep creating more scarcity and more violence. These are fundamental patterns to the reality we live in. And I encourage you to pay attention to those patterns, because if you don't, we're not going to become conscious enough to solve the problems. If you like this video, I encourage you to do something. Be active. Speak out against the military-industrial complex. Be nice to your neighbor. Talk to somebody that you maybe had a fight with in the past, and make amends. Just again, be peaceful. Thanks for watching.